Let's dive into an idea that might feel a little counterintuitive at first, but it's absolutely crucial for anyone who cares about education. And it's this: teaching does not guarantee learning. Let's break down what that really means.
Okay, so this quote right here, this is the heart of the whole conversation. It's not about criticizing teachers at all. Instead, it's about challenging a really old assumption we've had about how education works. To make learning truly stick, we have to get this distinction right. So, where does this gap between teaching something and someone actually learning it come from? Well, it all kicks off as something we can call the great misconception.
For the longest time, the model seemed pretty simple, right? A teacher explains something and students learn it. It was viewed as this direct download of knowledge. But now we know that learning is way, way more complicated than just passively soaking up information.
See, real learning is an active process. It's about a student taking in new information, kind of wrestling with it, and figuring out how it connects to what they already know. It's a genuine change in what they understand, what they can do, or even how they feel.
All right, so let's get super clear on the difference here. It really helps to think of teaching and learning as two separate, though definitely related, things.
Here's a great way to think about it.
Teaching is the means, and learning is the outcome. So picture a chef cooking an amazing meal. That's the teaching. But the person actually eating it, tasting it, and getting nourishment from it, that's the learning. They're two parts of the same process, for sure, but they are not the same thing. So, if a teacher's doing a fantastic job, why doesn't learning always happen? Let's take a look at some of the common roadblocks that get in the way.
It usually boils down to four major things: passive learning environments, a disconnect from what students already know, not enough feedback, and that classic one-size-fits-all approach. Let's dig into each one.
First up, the passive environment. We've all been there, right? Just sitting and listening. When students are only listening, their brains aren't really firing on all cylinders to make sense of the information. This often leads to what you'd call shallow learning, where the info might be there for a test, but it's gone pretty quickly after.
Next, there's the knowledge gap. Okay, imagine learning is like building with Legos. If I hand you a new Lego piece, but you don't have anything to snap it onto, it's just a loose piece. New information has to connect to something you already know for it to have any meaning.
And then you've got the feedback void. A teacher could be delivering the most brilliant lesson ever, but without checking in to see if students are actually getting it, what educators call formative assessment, they're basically flying blind. It's so easy to assume everyone's on the same page when they're really not.
And finally, the one-size-fits-all trap. Every classroom is filled with different people who learn in different ways and at different speeds. A single teaching style is almost guaranteed to work well for some, but it's just not going to land with everyone else.
So what's the fix? How do we actually bridge this gap between teaching and learning? Well, the answer is in a pretty big shift in perspective, moving to what's called a learner-centered approach.
This shift completely changes the role of the teacher. They go from being a transmitter of information to being a facilitator of learning. The goal isn't just to cover the material anymore, it's to design experiences where students can actively build their own understanding.
So what does that actually look like? It's all about active learning. This is stuff like getting students into lively discussions, having them solve tricky problems, work on cool projects, and team up with their classmates. This is where the deep, sticky learning really happens. This whole learner-centered thing has a few key ingredients. It gets students thinking about their own thinking, which is a fancy term called metacognition. It depends on that constant feedback loop to see what's working. And maybe most importantly, it casts the teacher as more of a guide or a coach, not just a lecturer. So what's the big idea here? What does this all boil down to? It really comes down to changing one single fundamental question that every educator should be asking themselves. The old school question has always been, have I taught this? Right? This question focuses on the teacher's actions. Did I cover the material? Did I get through the lesson plan? It's basically a checklist. But the new question, the learner-centered one, is this: have my students learned this? It seems like such a small change, but that one word switch represents a huge shift in focus away from the teacher's efforts and squarely onto the student's progress. And asking this new question changes everything. It pushes teachers to constantly reflect on what they're doing, to design their lessons with actual learning outcomes in mind, and to be ready to change things up on the fly based on what their students really need. So if you take away just one thing from all of this, let it be this: A great education isn't measured by how much effort a teacher puts into instructing, it's measured by how much a student actually learns and grows. It's all about the transformation of the learner. And I'll leave you with this to think about. When was the last time you felt like you truly learned something? Not just memorized it, but really learned it. What was happening? And what was it that made that knowledge actually stick with you?